It's so quiet in here. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this public meeting. This meeting is about the draft environmental assessment for St. Louis Lambert International Airport's Consolidated Terminal Program. I got through that title. That's a big title. We are so glad to have you here this afternoon. My name is Lorna Godwin of Vector Communications, and Vector is providing the public engagement and communications services for this project, working with the prime contractor, WSP, on behalf of St. Louis Lambert International Airport. Well, last May, the Federal Aviation Administration approved St. Louis's 2023 Airport Master Plan, which outlines proposed improvements to meet air travel demand through 2040. This was a big deal. And we're pleased to have with us today members of FAA Central Region. Would you please stand and be acknowledged? Great. Welcome. Also with us are representatives from MoDOT, the Missouri Department of Transportation, who is a partner to the airport in this project. Would you please stand? Part of the master plan is the Consolidated Terminal Program. The FAA requires that an environmental assessment be conducted for projects that include federal dollars. In the case of the Consolidated Terminal Program, we must evaluate potential construction impacts and propose actions to minimize those impacts. So why are we hosting this meeting tonight? To present the results of our draft environmental assessment and to get your feedback. Your feedback is extremely important because it will be documented and incorporated into the final environmental assessment we submit to the FAA. You can submit your feedback tonight at the public comment station or by completing the online comment form by Friday, August 16th. There's a QR code on your welcome handout where you can find the online comment form. During this presentation, you'll first hear remarks from Airport Director Rhonda Hamm-Newbrigi, followed by a presentation from the consulting team. Afterwards, we'll do a Q&A. I'll bring the microphone out to you to ask your question, and the team will answer it. So now it is my pleasure to welcome Rhonda.
Thank you, Lorna. And good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Am I clicking? I guess I am. Yes, okay. I just wanted to make sure. Okay. We're using, okay. Maybe. I apologize. Who's the technical person here? I can do without slides, but there's some pretty pictures, so, you know. Good now? Okay. All right. Good evening again, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm going to share a few slides about where we're at as the airport and why this project is so important, and as we think about our future and we think about this region and what this region really needs to think about in terms of our aviation. So we've had a lot of good announcements in the last few years. 2019 was the best year we saw for passenger enplanements in about 15 years. We hit just shy of 16 million people. We all know that COVID hit after that, but we really started coming back last year and seeing really strong numbers after COVID. And this year, we will surpass 2019. If we look through July, we are ahead of our target of where we were for the same time frame in 2019. And just to put that in context, if we think about June, we had 1.6 million people go through our terminal. That's connecting traffic, local traffic, and deplaning traffic. If we think about that on a daily basis and just look at our security checkpoints, we had 67,000 more people this July go through our checkpoints than we did in July of 2019. And we start looking at those numbers and we start thinking about the future and we start thinking about the growth. That's really what preempted a few years ago when we started this master plan, was that we are seeing nice growth, we are seeing nice rebound, and we really need to think about the future. We also had some great announcements on service levels. You know, one of our goals has been to try and always bring new partners into the table, not only new destinations, but new airline partners. So 2 years ago, we brought in Lufthansa with the Frankfurt flight. That's been gangbusters. Our 2 years have come and gone. We're still seeing load factors, especially in those strong peak months, of 98 to 99% outbound, low 90s on the inbound. So terrific numbers on that flight, and it's doing well. We also saw Montreal this year was added, and that's another key international destination for us that we've heard from a lot of the consumers about more flights into Canada. The nice piece about the Montreal flight is it's connecting a large number of people also to destinations in Europe and beyond. And because of the connectivity and the hub that they have in Montreal, it's a one-stop, easy destination. So that flight we think is going to do quite well. Last month, we also brought a new partner in. We brought Avelo Airlines. They're based out of New Haven, Connecticut. So it is one of those ultra-low-cost carriers. They've been around for a few years, but they're now starting to grow their market share. They typically have been a coastal market, so up and down the East Coast, up and down the West Coast, but they're really starting to think about where do we go from here in the center of the country. And we were really the first airport that they picked to start looking at how do we grow our opportunities in the center of the country versus just those coastal markets. So they're flying into New Haven. We've also had a lot of growth that we've seen in terms of seat availability. United has brought most of their regional jets back into the mainline fold. Delta Airlines continues to grow their market share. And we've seen, obviously, the continued growth of Southwest. We hit a milestone again in June where 300,000 passengers connected on Southwest flights here in St. Louis. That's an all-time high for Southwest, and we're seeing that number continue to grow. So 39% of that market share for Southwest is the growth, and that is a key piece as we think about the future, we think about this master plan, and we think about the proposed terminal that's been designed. Several years ago, we worked with the business community and we formed a group to look at a strategic plan for St. Louis. That strategic plan was really in the making for about 2 years, and then it was a 5-year plan. But since then, we've kept that plan intact because the 4 key elements of that plan work for us today and certainly work as we think about the future of this airport. And those 4 key points were to grow our air service and retain it. It was the economic development that we could continue to bring partners here and grow relationships and grow economic development from this airport. It was also about the customer experience. And when we look at our mission and we look at that circle surrounded by safety, because that's always our number one spot here, all 4 of those elements fit into our master plan and where we're going for the future. So when we looked at this consolidated terminal plan that we came up with, one of the things that we thought about was how do we retain both terminals? How do we consolidate and build one terminal? How do we put a brand new terminal maybe on the other side of the airfield? So we didn't just look at one opportunity. We looked at 22 different viable options and which made the most sense from a wide range, and all of that was part of the master planning. But the proposal that was submitted in our master plan, and that the airlines, the airport, and most of the community partners that were engaged looked at this consolidated terminal as the most viable opportunity. It allows us to retain our historic domes. That's a key piece. Those domes are iconic across the world, not just here in St. Louis, but literally across the aviation world. So we're able to retain those iconic domes. We're able to consolidate a checkpoint, more efficient, less manpower needed to be able to consolidate a checkpoint. We're able to bring a much larger international arrival area into play. That's another critical piece, especially as we continue to grow our international markets. We have a very subpar international arrival area in terms of the size of it today and the efficiency of it. So as we thought about this new terminal and we thought about all of those key pieces, that connecting traffic growth with Southwest, the ability to have the dual-sided terminal and ease of connections, the opportunity to grow our checkpoint, the opportunity to grow our international arrival, to grow our parking spaces, which we know is another challenge. Same thing with our concession space. As we think about our concession space, there's not enough space today based on how this terminal was designed in 1956. It was a much different area. So today, as we think about the new terminal and we think about the consolidated plan that we're proposing, it gives us much more opportunity to grow our revenues from a concession for food, beverage, retail, from a parking perspective. So all of those things were key concepts as we thought about this project. Some of the things, obviously we cannot do this without our airline partners. They are a key piece to this. And some of the critical pieces were, as we thought about this project and we thought about the length of time that it takes to engage and produce a product like this, we wanted to be able to keep things moving. We've shared a timeline in the past. I think it's probably on one of the boards out here as well. But we've shared that timeline is several years to complete this project. So in an effort to keep it moving, one of the things that we did last year was get approval from our airlines for what we call some of the enabling projects, things that we know this airport needs to do, whether this project would move forward or not. Things like our central utility plant, which was built back in the 1950s, our airfield maintenance facility, which was built in the early 60s. All of those things have long passed their lifespan. So the airlines agreed for about $335 million to move those projects forward. Our West Airfield, which is consolidating all of our many little buildings that have been built in years, kind of hobbled together. That project is well underway on the design. We do expect the construction of that to go out, the bid go out in spring for construction of that. If we think about a west de-icing pad on the western part of the new airfield, that would be a de-icing pad that would allow us to have the newest technologies from recovering the glycol system and being able to have an efficient de-icing system. So that's under contract right now. The design will be starting on that shortly. And then we have, as I mentioned, the central utility plant along with the substation. That also has been awarded. That's just now getting ready to go out for design. So over the next 2 years, you'll start seeing the design of these things finish and the construction of these projects start. You'll also see the demolition of the Missouri Air National Guard facility that's been vacant prior to when I arrived in 2010. So all of those projects were enabling projects that the airlines authorized over a year ago to be able to start this project and to keep it moving timely. The last piece I'll talk about before I turn it over to John is where are we at today with being able to go to the next step. The next step is to be able to go out for full architectural design. A key piece of that is this environmental piece that is happening right now, and the conclusion of that, which would allow us to issue for the RFP for architectural design. We currently have negotiated a third amendment agreement with our airlines. That's a 2-year extension to our existing agreement. But with that is another $650 million worth of enabling projects and design projects. So we have the required number of signatory carriers on that. We'll be moving all of that forward here in the next week or so. But that project, that next step allows us to be able to go out for the full design of this terminal once the environmental assessment is complete, and then be able to do a lot of other enabling projects along the way so that that timeline can keep moving in an appropriate manner as we think about getting to the end design. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the person who's been leading this project under our master plan, and that's John Van Wensel for WSP.
Thank you. I'll talk a little bit about the environmental aspects of all this because that's what tonight is about. So let's start with a few definitions. You'll hear NEPA a lot tonight, and that was an act, a National Environmental Policy Act. It established both the EPA as well as this process that we're talking about tonight where projects are reviewed. You heard FAA is here tonight. FAA is, of course, the Federal Aviation Administration, and the reason that they're so important is there's several, really. First, they oversee safety. They put out standards that we all must follow when we plan taxiways, terminals, what have you, and we follow those. And when the master plan was approved, FAA reviewed all of that for meeting the standards. They also provide funding for certain capital projects at airports, and that when you hear funding, federal funding, it's always important to say that where that money comes from, and this is aviation self-funded system. So if you fly, you'll see a ticket tax. That tax goes to a fund, and FAA oversees that, and then certain projects are eligible to receive some of that funding back. So it's an aviation closed loop, like Jerry Beckman likes to say. It funds itself, no general or local taxes in that. And then lastly, most important for tonight, FAA oversees how NEPA is applied in aviation, and that's why we're following their process. It's led by the airport, but it's FAA's process, and they in the end make the decision about all this. So we talked about what NEPA means, but what are the purposes of it other than just environmental? You know, environmental means so many different things, and there's really three key points. First of all, FAA has to consider the impacts of a project, which of course means you need to know what the impacts are, and then you have to consider them before you make a decision. So that's the first piece. Second piece, I know I'm going out of order with the slide here, just to make sure you're paying attention, but is the second piece is, okay, are you minimizing those impacts? Can some of them be avoided? Can you minimize them? And only then let's talk about what you need to mitigate. And then third, and it's one of the reasons we're here tonight, is of course, okay, you're doing all this analysis, don't do it in the proverbial back room. You know, share all this information. So there was a meeting at the beginning of this process, there's a meeting at the end of the master plan, several meetings, and now we're here with draft analysis, again, for review and input. So in terms of the document, and you can see the document over there, I believe you can, it's so big you can see it from outer space. It's a very large document. It's 110 pages of technical analysis, and the rest is all technical appendices. It's on the website. It's been published since July 3rd. You have an opportunity to provide input for another 10 days as well. It's also at some of the area libraries. There's 2 locations at the airport here where the document is available. So there's multiple ways you can review it, including, as was mentioned, tonight, of course, you can give comments as well. There's a couple major sections in that document. First, I have to put my glasses on here. First, we talk about why we do, is there a need for a project? Do you really need it? And if so, then next is, okay, what are the ways of achieving this project? And as Rhonda mentioned, we looked at 22 alternatives in the master plan. What's the most efficient way, the most affordable way to do it, the way with the least environmental impact? That's the alternatives analysis. And then, of course, look at the impact, which is the logical part, which is a lot of analysis, and that's what most of the document is about. And then lastly, again, it's about, okay, so those are the impacts, but can you avoid any of these impacts? Can you minimize them? And then again, can you mitigate those impacts? Those are the sort of the major components of that, the document that you'll see. So we're talking about NEPA and having a draft. It's probably useful to zoom out for a moment and let you know kind of where we are in the grand scheme of things. So the master plan is up there on the left side. That was started in 2020. We had meetings during that, and I think some of you attended then. And FAA reviewed and approved that. That was finished sort of in late 22. Then FAA did public scoping and agency scoping, so there was another set of meetings that you may have heard about where FAA was trying to get input from people on what they wanted to make sure that folks wanted addressed in the environmental assessment. Then the process was started, and now the analysis is complete in draft form, and as you see, we are here, there. That's tonight. You get official access to all that information, all the people to continue your review, because again, it's been out there since July 3rd, but you have another 10 days to provide comments. Ultimately, FAA will look at all those comments. A final EA is issued, and then FAA makes its decision about whether there's acceptable impact, and sometimes that can be called a finding of no significant impact. It's a type of approval FAA can issue. Of course, things don't stop at that point. You also can't go straight to construction at that point. You need to hire, as Rhonda mentioned, an architect in this case. They need to go through a process. There's often permitting that's still required, including local permits. Then you can go to construction. So we're still some years away, but this is the first major environmental review step. So I mentioned previous meetings, and if you were not at any of the previous meetings, it might be helpful to give a brief overview. So during the master plan, right in the beginning in 2020, which is back in when COVID hit us all, we established a specific committee to review all the work we were doing, make sure we weren't missing anything, incorporate their comments. And that was a group of more than 40 people, so we call it the Technical Advisory Committee, or TAC. We love our acronyms, as you've probably figured out by now. And that included city officials, county officials, officials from the adjacent communities to the south of the airport, as well as aviation organizations, local and federal agencies like FAA, MoDOT, more than 40 people. We also did several surveys during the master plan, 3 to be specific. We got almost 3,000 responses from people on all kinds of topics, so that was all considered during the planning process. So when we were done with the master plan in late 22, we had about 1,000 interactions. If we added up the meetings and the people that attended, it's about 1,000 interactions. And then since we've started this environmental process, we haven't added tonight's people yet, but we were up to, I think, 1,350 people that we've engaged with. So quite a few meetings and quite a few interactions with people. So with that, let's talk about the program itself. Rhonda gave a brief introduction, and Jerry Beckman is going to expand on that with a more detailed review of the project itself.
All right. Thanks, John. Good evening. I'm Jerry Beckman. I'm the airport's Deputy Director for Planning and Development, and I'm going to talk about the program goals. So the goal of the proposed program is to provide facilities that are functionally modern, cost-efficient, that take care of the customer, and are reliable and resilient. And you see that in the box over on the right. That's really our theme for all this. I will say that, part of modernity is to accommodate growth. And we're going to talk about the growth of this airport in a little bit as well. We'll also be, this program hopefully will provide the vision for the next 40 years of this airport. Terminal's been here for a long time, as we pointed out, and we want to keep it a little bit more ahead of the curve than we have been. So an element of our NEPA evaluation is to identify our purpose and need for new facilities. And, you can see the need is demonstrated here by the conditions that you observe. On the left there, Terminal 1, overcrowded hold rooms and concourses. On the right there, Terminal 2, congested passenger pickup areas. If you've been through the traffic out at Terminal 2, thankfully MoDOT's kind of done with this for now, but it's still a tricky thing to get through, especially at peak times. One of the things that that we're also up against as well, and it's in the lower right, you see the variety of aircraft. When this terminal was opened, we had 60-seat aircraft in the 50s. And then in the 90s, had 737s with 140 some odd seats. Now we've got 737 MAX with, pushing 180 seats. So really, it's a lot more passengers in exactly the same facilities, and we need to find a way to keep up with that. Also, on the left side of the diagram as well is our forecast. And early on in the program, we get our forecast approved by FAA. We kind of did that during COVID. A couple years later, we went to some effort to revalidate it, and we still find that by 2040 we expect to be serving 21 million passengers out of this terminal. So really, just very substantial numbers that we need to catch up with. So in this slide, we talk about needs versus solutions. You know, you saw the forecast that we just spoke about, and now we find that we need to right-size the terminal and concourse space. We definitely have old and aging facilities. Terminal 1 here, you know, 50s vintage. Terminal 2, no longer the new terminal. It was opened in 1998. So really, you know, we need to find a way to update, but also these updates will allow us to reduce O&M costs and really make our facilities more appealing for the airlines to operate out of. And that's something that we've been fighting for years. We also find ourselves with inadequate concessions. We need to increase the customer choices that are out there, upgrade the customer experience, but that also is kind of cyclical with insufficient revenue opportunities. We really need to provide the ability for our passengers to spend more money here. One of the ways we can do that is by increasing the size of the parking facilities we have, and we'll talk about that in more detail. But a frequent complaint we get is Terminal 2 parking garage is full. Yeah, it's going to be full in our current facilities, and we're going to try and do something about that. So for those of you not familiar with our aerial layout, as you look at this photograph, really only the domes, the FAA control tower, and the area down towards the Metrolink station will remain as is. Everything else, you know, on the building side of this will be new. We'll have a new consolidated security checkpoint. We'll have a concourse that runs east and west, parallel to the existing Terminal 1, almost 5,000 feet long. We'll have covered roadways that will be a real boon to our passengers as well. We'll also have, improved parking garage with up to 7,200 spots, with a consolidated ground transportation center to take care of the shuttle traffic and the Ubers and Lyfts that kind of clog up the roadways these days, and also a consolidated customs facility on the west end of the terminal. We won't have passengers, if you depart Terminal 1 internationally now, well, you still come back to Terminal 2 to depart and get through our federal inspection services. So this is something that we'll also be improving. And this is just a sectional view of what we just looked at. Really kind of provides some other ways of taking a look at the improvements that we'll be enjoying. But the parking garage here, four levels. The concourses will be a lot wider. The width will allow for increased revenue opportunities and increased concessions. About 60% increase in the square foot available for that. We'll be right-sizing the building space with 1.5 million square feet of space. But better circulation and more appropriately sized hold rooms, and even the bag claim area there that you see towards the bottom of that, it'd be nice to have a bag claim area that's got some daylight into it. It's pretty dark and low ceilings down in here. We'll be improving that condition as well. So a further driver for the terminal program is really driven by what we can do for terminal access and with our parking and ground transportation. We want to have a condition while we build a new parking garage. We'll have 7,200 parking spaces approximately in that facility. We'll be increasing our on-airport parking supply to about 13,000 spaces. And that's about a 47% increase of what we have currently. The current Terminal 1 garage is at 2,000 spaces. Terminal 2 is only 1,000. So really a significant improvement for people that are traveling here. One of the things I'd like to point out, too, is that if you look at the diagram on the right, with the orange roadway system there, our primary access from the west will be in the Cypress Road area. Primary access from the east will be near Airflight Drive, but both will provide greatly improved decision-making times as the terminal is approached on the roadway system. So when we talk about the general timing of the terminal and concourses, this diagram lays it out rather simply. The phase 1 is on the left side there in red. The demolition of Concourse A would start early in 2027, then ultimately conclude by late 2028. That includes the consolidated security checkpoint that I mentioned. Then after that, we would take off into phase 2 construction, which is the blue area on the right there. We would be demolishing Concourse C early in 2029, and then rebuilding that new eastern concourse. That would include the FIS or customs area as well. And then in phase 3, finally, could wrap that up as early as 2031. Would be completing the east bag claim area and other parts of the terminal that we kind of had to leave incomplete, as we've got to stay open for business, so some of this will be phased sequentially, so we'll have to have some parts that we get to a little bit later. So very broadly speaking, this is the timeline for the program itself. We've pointed out before, we've completed much of the planning for this in the broader sense. We have a revised airport layout plan, an approved airport master plan. We're negotiating with our airlines in terms of how we pay for all these improvements. We've got the ongoing draft environmental assessment. John pointed out the big book over there, and it's certainly available in numerous places besides here. Right now, we're very much involved in the professional services contracting side of this, where we're selecting or procuring designers and construction inspectors and surveyors, all things that are kind of precursors for getting a contractor selected. And the anticipated construction then would start as early as 2025 with the demolition of the Missouri Air National Guard facility, and then also doing some preparation type work in the area west of the Terminal 1 parking garage. So having said all that, right now then I'll turn it over to Doug Gregory of Crawford, Murphy & Tilley to talk a little bit more about the purpose and need stuff. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Jerry. I want to take a couple minutes just to kind of go through a little bit about the details from an environmental assessment standpoint, build upon both the comments by Rhonda and Jerry so far this evening. What you see on the map here, on the slide, I should say, are various elements of the proposed program. This graphic really has to do with proposed demolition of existing infrastructure on the airport. As a part of the environmental process, we do assess what existing infrastructure needs to be demolished as a part or to make way for the proposed improvements. As Jerry has noted, I'd like to highlight both that the existing Metrolink station at Terminal 1 and the historic domes remain in the overall program. Also, as a part of the NEPA process, I think it's important to note that there are a couple of the existing buildings, that are deemed historic, and those are the old Missouri Air National Guard facilities. So the airport and the consultant team have been in coordination with the State Historic Preservation Office, and we have an agreement, a draft memorandum of agreement in place to make sure that we photo document those buildings, including some drone video, before those facilities are demolished. So that's a part of the overall NEPA commitment, and also in coordination with our public agencies. So kind of turn to the proposed improvements. This is more of a 2D view of the overall proposed program. As Jerry and Rhonda have noted, quite a few elements that are proposed as part of the overall development program. I'm not going to go back and through details because the team already went through them, but really wanted just to highlight that this information is also available at the various board stations and also in the draft environmental document as well. So we talk about the proposed program, but a little bit back how we got here, and John did a great job of kind of going through the process that the master plan looked at. I just wanted to touch briefly on it as well. So when we looked at the overall terminal function, or where the passengers travel, depart, and arrive back in St. Louis, as it was noted, we looked at 22 different alternatives across the airport to accommodate what we saw as the need for new facilities at the airport going forward. Those included variations of renovating the existing terminals, looking at different changes operationally between where the airlines were between Terminal 1 and Terminal 2, looking at 2 new terminals instead of 1 consolidated terminal, and obviously the proposed program from a consolidated terminal standpoint. So all of those alternatives kind of got boiled down into 2 main themes. One was retaining the 2 terminal operation, or looking to the benefits of the Consolidated Terminal Program or a single terminal. So as we noted previously, there was an entire process as a part of the master plan that looked to refine those alternatives, look at cost, efficiency, and I think most importantly, the overall customer experience, both from a terminal function standpoint and also from a landside experience. So through that process, ultimately the single terminal concept was selected and is what presented in the draft environmental assessment. Same thing on the land side. There were actually over 30 alternatives that were assessed from a landside infrastructure standpoint. Again, looking at a variety of different options, recognizing that the existing access and infrastructure that's in place to accommodate the passenger terminal experience lend itself to looking at alternatives in the preferred program to re-envision the landside access, parking garage, ground transportation center, et cetera. So when we talk about the environmental resources, it's an important part of the overall process. Really, there are 14 different categories that were evaluated as a part of the environmental assessment, ranging from air quality to aircraft noise, cultural and historical resources, a number of different elements. It's important to note that all of those categories also have federal or state agencies that are oversee those components. And so as a part of the environmental process, a lot of coordinations occurred with both federal, state agencies that have responsibility or jurisdiction over those environmental resources. So as we talk about tonight, I think it's very important. We want to hear directly from you as a part of the process. And so I think most of you have been here before the presentation started, but there are board stations all around the room. Representatives both from the airport and the consultant team are available to answer any questions. And we really encourage you to look at the information, ask questions, and most importantly, provide any comments that you have relative to the Consolidated Terminal Program. This is an important step in the overall process and the journey that the airport's going to embark on to build or develop the proposed improvements. So it's very important that we hear from you. So how do we do that, or how do you do that? There are a couple different ways. There is a QR code that is on your handout. That will take you directly to an online comment form that you can fill out, and we will receive that information immediately. There are also paper copies back at Station 6. There are paper comment forms that you can fill out and leave at the table with one of the representatives. And then there's also a station, if you'd like to provide verbal comment, you're more than welcome to do that as well. If you'd like to take the comment form home and fill that out and send it back via mail to either the airport contact listed here or the FAA contact listed here, you're more than welcome to do that as well. So as John noted, right now we're seeking input from the public. Following that process, again, the public comment period's open till August 16th. Following that process, we will compile all the comments received. We will document those. We will put them into the final draft environmental assessment that will go to the Federal Aviation Administration for final review and ultimately a decision relative to an environmental finding. And with that, I will open it up for, I think, we're going to have Lorna direct questions and answer.
Great. Thank you to all our presenters for that presentation. That's very informative and brings you up to date. Are there any questions? Oh, is that good? There are no questions.
Did we wow you?
Yeah, really. Okay. No questions. Oh, okay. Hold up. Wait, hold on.
See who answers them.
From the boards that I went around and looked at, one of my curiosities is, and I got to speak with one of your representatives, they said that when you're dealing with the noise barrier, okay, and the stuff that it's going to affect with the residents in the area, that you would go to their individual homes only in the most impacted, decided area to ask them residents specifically, instead of going to the communities around them to find out how they might be impacted. In our case, it's just Pear Tree. It's a bunch of apartments where you find that people move in and out quite frequently. So actually getting a good opinion on something like that may not be beneficial just from hitting the doors of apartment buildings in, 20 apartments. And you should probably go to the communities for that. We haven't found a lot of information coming from the airport to us, but I've reached out and contacted some of your people, and they've told me that they would keep me more up to date on that.
So one of the things we are trying to do, and we encourage everybody to go to the Fly STL website. It's got all of the information on it about this project and who to reach out to. I mean, we can't go knock on every single door, obviously, in the surrounding community, but we are sending out flyers. We're trying to make sure that, everyone is aware. We're doing announcements. We're doing press releases. The website is the best place for the opportunity. It's a simple website. If you don't have a computer, you can certainly go to the libraries and pull it up through the libraries to get the information. And I mean, we're happy to talk to anybody, but it's hard to go knock on each door other than sending out flyers and sending out, releases.
Yeah, I was talking specifically to the noise impact. The noise impact is going to impact Pear Tree Apartments. There'll be some homes that are affected, but apparently they're not close enough for you guys to consider important. These apartments that the lady said would be contacted, that they would contact the individuals that live within those apartments. And what I'm saying is those individuals change hands so often that getting a real, opinion of what people have had to live for 20 years or more, really you're not going to get that from just knocking on the doors of those apartments. So maybe talking with the city and their aldermen instead might get you a better impact of what kind of complaints they're getting. In our case, Boeing's doing an awful lot of experimenting, and some of those sonic booms are scaring the residents. Okay.
Yeah, so I would note we'll definitely take that comment and document that. As it relates to the noise and the Pear Tree Apartments, so there are a couple improvements proposed on or adjacent to I-70 that trigger further investigation, further research relative to whether the noise wall will ultimately be needed. Obviously, there's a lot still from a design standpoint, and some of those design options or considerations after the environmental might adjust what is ultimately needed on I-70 to support the overall airport program. And so we wanted to note and make that commitment that those discussions and dialogue during the design process will occur. Yep.
Are there any other questions? Okay, great. As Doug said, please fill out a comment form. Also, you can tell that we videotape this presentation. It will be on the website next week, so you can see it and share it with other people. And we'll be making this presentation again in about 15 or 20 minutes. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.